It's gonna make me.
This is Sam Electric Ghost, and we're live with Jake Maxwell. Do you want me to call your last name as well, or do you want to be just known as Jake Maxwell?
Jake Maxwell is good. No, usually that's how I
Okay.
present myself.
Okay. And want everybody to know we got the website up there, jakemaxwellproductions.com, so you can click on that for those who are going to be on the audio podcast. We also are a featured podcast on Newsly. And if you use coupon code GHOST to get 1 month free premium subscription, you can stop scrolling and start listening. Again, the Fam Electric Ghost podcast is on Newsly. We'll be on there later tonight. So thank you again for being on the podcast. How are you doing tonight?
I'm good. Just hanging out, working on some stuff. We've got some pretty cool events coming down the pipeline that we're finalizing. But for the most part, it's kind of just another day in paradise.
So you're a DJ, music producer, and event promoter, and you're just talking about their events. What events are you working on?
Yeah. So we run nightclub events all around the country, mostly for the LGBTQ kink community and the LGBTQ community in general. But we've got some events. We're celebrating 1 year in Columbus next week. So next weekend will be our 1 year anniversary of our event in Columbus, which we're super stoked about. And then the following day, we're going to Claw, which is a big leather convention essentially, and we are their official Saturday night party. So that's going to be pretty fun in Cleveland. And then we're launching in Philadelphia a couple weeks later. But yeah, for the most part, it's just this little stretch of time for us is always very hectic because we basically come out of March into April, and then it's a full-blown sprint till basically the end of June, which is Pride Month, and then we have like the weird downtime in July, and then suddenly it's back up again for the rest of the year. So being a DJ in this life, it's very, very interesting for sure.
So the events you have are these like festival type of events, or like with multiple DJs and acts?
I mean, it depends. So, like, we usually do 2 or 3 DJs on our card every single event that we do. So, and usually these are monthly events in most cities. Some of the cities we go to are quarterly. So they're traditional nightclub events, I would say, where we have a rotation of DJs. Usually, you'll hear circuit music, is what we describe it as. But oftentimes, we try to tailor each event around the identity of the city we're going to. So, in a city like St. Louis, you may hear something more tech housey than you would say in like the heart of DC. So it kind of just vibe changes, but usually it's 1 or 2 DJs per night. Yeah.
So you'll do the type of music that's associated with that cultural aspect of the city.
Yeah, I think for us, one of the things we wanted to do with LOBO when we started it was establish that. We always tell people we don't want to be the promoters that come into your city, take your money, leave, and then come back and take your money and don't care about what happens when we're not there. So any city we go to, we try very hard to lay roots down in and give back to that community and try to really tailor something that the city can be proud of.
Okay, so your events are not just about like making a profit as an event programmer, but you're actually committed to an actual causes and the community that you're supporting. So, right? Is that what you're saying?
So essentially, yeah, because we have LOBO, the for-profit party, but LOBO also now has a 501c3 recognized wing as well called the LOBO Initiative, which is a nonprofit here in the States. And that focuses on giving back to the LGBTQ community, especially youth and adults with disabilities who have been given kind of like a rough hand in life, who want to chase their dreams and just haven't had the opportunities to do so. So we, pair them with a mentor and give them the skills and tools that they might need to go and do that, and then off they go.
So the LOBO is lights out, barks out. That's what okay. And it's an event you focus on sex positive, kink positive, body positive, gender inclusive, in a safe space. And I think that's really important. I don't want to get into total politics of it, but there are places in the US that if you try to do what you're doing, you could have serious consequences, right?
Yeah, for sure. And I would be remiss if I didn't say that it isn't something that always is in the back of our mind, even in today's world, anywhere we go, that, we understand the type of event we run. We understand that more or less could put a target on our event. But at the end of the day, we as an organization have decided that it is more important for us to stand up and defend our community than it is to just be like, this is, not worth it, because you have just as good of a chance of getting hit by a bus, right? It's just the risk that we're willing to take to give our people a safe place to go.
Yeah, but I guess there might be certain like parts of the country you might have a hard time actually even doing it. Do you stay away from those areas or try to push it?
I mean, I will be honest, we definitely are not planning on going to some place like an Alabama or a Mississippi anytime soon.
Yeah.
Obviously, once you get into that deep hearted South, like, yes, our event, calling up a nightclub and being like, yeah, we want to bring a fetish event to your city, they might say yes, but also we're realists. But St. Louis is a good example. St. Louis welcomed us in with open arms, and they're all about what we're trying to do. So I think that yes, there is a part of it that when we are looking at potential cities, we do weigh that. But also we think of the other side of that coin, which is how cool would it be if we could somehow manage to find the one venue in this city or state, wherever it is, that will let us take a shot at this and make something magical happen.
So I wonder, like, could you do something like this in Miami, or is there climate in Florida to the point where you couldn't?
So I think something like this would absolutely work in Miami. We have done one in Fort Lauderdale at the Wilton Manors Eagle, and it was a great time. We also acknowledge that, like, so for myself, my nickname is Ultra, right? Like, people used to know me as DJ Ultra Pup. I should have changed to Jake Maxwell. But the reason I started with the Ultra name was because my love for music happened in Miami at Bayfront Park at Ultra Music Festival as a kid, and then going to Vagabond down in South Beach, because they used to have 18 plus nights when I would visit my grandmother. I'd sneak out of the house and run down to South Beach with my friends at the 18 plus nights at Vagabond. So, like, I think something like this absolutely would slam dunk in South Beach. It's more so finding the venue, because that area is so competitive with nightclub events. But I think it absolutely could work. Sure.
That's cool. Yeah, I think that particular area, maybe the Panhandle would be harder to do, but
yeah. For sure.
But in the more like areas that are known for having clubs, you probably wouldn't have the pressures that you could have. And even a place like Austin, maybe you could do Austin. I don't know.
Yeah, we've reached out to Austin. So our motto has always been, we will go anywhere that will have us, right? Like, anyone who's willing to open their doors to us, we will do the best that we can with what we've got to work with, because we understand what this type of event can do for our community. And for them to have the opportunity to experience it is what ultimately, at the end of the day, is most important for us.
Yeah, well, it's good to have a safe place for people who, should be allowed to have a good time and be able to, enjoy the company of other people who are like-minded, so you don't end up being, ostracized. Because, like, I grew up as, kind of a nerdy kid, and I'm into kind of weird things. And like, it turns like I'm a black musician, but I was into punk.
Love punk music.
Not something like I'm playing Hooskadoo and Black Flag and stuff like that. And like, they were like, well, why aren't you playing some like Funkadelic? Now, I like Funkadelic, but I liked a punk aesthetic. And so if I'm in a place where, I could go to a place where my own crowd wouldn't like what I was doing, because I wasn't doing Michael Jackson. I wasn't doing Sly Stone. I'm trying to do Hooskadoo. And they're like, what's that? What's that? That's like, that's not what we want.
No,
but so
sure.
Trying to find that place where you can be accepted, and go to New York and play like a CBGB's type of place, then you can get through. Yeah, it's just interesting. So I guess you were talking about like how your love of those events. So how, is that why you became a DJ? Because you had been able to you attended those type of DJ events as a kid?
So my DJ origin story is straight out of a Marvel movie at this point, I swear to God. But honestly, it starts with the fact that my dad was a DJ at Studio 54 back in the day of like the actual madness that was. Often reminds me that what they show in the movie doesn't come anywhere close to what actually happened. And I'm like, oh, good to know. And then I became a DJ, and I'm like, okay, yeah, no, you weren't lying. But ultimately, obviously, with his doing that, my parents split young, so anytime I was with him, he'd always have these mixed CDs, and I'd always like be into it, have a love for music. Ironically enough, my family was very adamant against me becoming a DJ or even working in the music field. They knew it was a harder field to get into. They knew that it can be kind of shitty sometimes. The people that work in nightlife can be very, backstabby at times. And so they were worried about me, one, because I have autism, and two, because I genuinely try to see the best in people at all times. And
So your
so
word. Yeah.
despite that, after doing 12 years in politics, I decided I didn't want to do that anymore. I got my first political job when I was like 13. So I did that for a while. I was like, okay, I'm out of this. And I said, I'm going to pursue this dream for like a year or two and see what happens. I started DJing on all places online in the metaverse at the time, which was called Second Life, because they had a captive audience for me to practice to, and it worked. And so I honed my craft there, and then got very, very lucky meeting the right people. Someone who ultimately gave me a chance to go on the decks at what I will generously call a bathhouse. And I gave it a shot. That person came up to me and said that was the worst DJ set I've ever heard, but there's potential and I can teach you. And I said, okay, let's do it. And slowly but surely, that person who was called David Merrill, slowly started taking me along, giving me more bookings, letting me practice, and started headlining his events. And then we launched Lobo. But ultimately, yeah, my love for music and my path to becoming a DJ ultimately was kind of carved out just because, one, I wanted to go clubbing and didn't want to be around people. Like, if we're being truthful, I don't like large crowds. So I had to figure out how I could enjoy being at a nightclub without being around large crowds. And the most obvious way to do that was to be in the DJ booth. So I said, let's just do that.
Well, that's interesting. Because that's kind of like musicians could have the same kind of thing, right? If I'm with a band, right? And a lot of musicians, when they're in what you find that they're very shy, they're kind of antisocial, and then they're creating these big festivals and big concerts, but they really wouldn't really be in that crowd. They're better comfortable on the stage away from the crowd. So it's like there's the same kind of dynamic. A lot of musicians like that separation from the crowd that actually allows them to do it.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that was a large part of it for me, was basically that, like, I have gotten better at it as the years have gone on, for sure, at handling like being around a bunch of people. And but ultimately, when I first started, I was like, I just want to be at the nightclub without having to be like
On the floor.
yeah, correct. I didn't like being super moshy, like it just wasn't my thing. But yeah, then music is just fun. And it wasn't until we started realizing the impact that we were having on people that I realized this is ultimately what I wanted to do.
Well, can you talk a little bit more about how you actually got to be a better DJ and what maybe the actual, because I'm a musician and I
Yeah.
kind of like to be interested in terms of like, how did you get your flow, or how did you find that sweet spot where you started realizing that you actually were getting it into the point where you were doing good sets or innovations, things that you felt, good about what you were doing with your mixes?
Yeah. So I think for me, it was three really uniquely like separate but all tied together things that got me to where I was. First, when I started, and still now, had horrible self confidence and had a lot of imposter syndrome. And so when I first started, my friends were very good at balancing the "you did a good job" with the "okay, but it wasn't the greatest in the world." So like it was a tough love, but also like you're getting there kind of approach, which is what
Mm-hmm.
I needed because my friends at the time didn't want me to essentially start getting a massive ego, which ultimately did happen eventually. But neither here nor there. At that time, it couldn't have happened, or it would have been catastrophic. So there was that. The second one was my brother by choice and the co-owner of Lobo and my best friend in the entire world, Corey, aka Phoenix, who was there every single step of my journey, and then I taught them to DJ, and now they are doing it full time too. So we DJ all over the country together. We run Lobo together. Like it has literally been the two of us pushing each other and learning things from other people when we go out, and then coming back together and like teaching each other what we've learned, sharing libraries, like going in and basically doing this as a unit has tremendously helped. And then the third one, which was probably the most important, was just realizing that you don't ever stop getting better, right? Like there is a point where I reached about a year ago where it finally clicked, where I was like, okay, I do belong in this field of other professional DJs. I've proven that at this point. I know what I'm doing. but that doesn't mean that you just kind of stop practicing and sitting on your laurels and like not trying to do new things. And I've also been very lucky in that respect to have people around me as well to encourage me and to push me and to really, really help me chase, but also realize that if you want it, you've got to keep getting better. So all those three things are how we kind of like built up, I guess, my confidence, which was the biggest thing. But also, very early on in this process, I decided I didn't want to be a cookie cutter DJ, which is the same. You know, if you go to a circuit party, sometimes you'll hear very similar as sets, very similar as sounds. I wanted to be someone who was willing to push the boundaries and do circuit music, but do it my own way, do it in such a way that, you know, was unique to me, which is very nerdy, very meme tracky, very, you know, I'm going to play things that you probably aren't expecting to hear. And that's going to be like, oh, wow, that's interesting. So, yeah, all that really, I think, is how we figured it out. And then obviously playing shows, learning how to read crowds and all that came along too in the process.
So I think that's very interesting because, you know, I'm an experimental synthesist. I'm an analog, you know, old school Moogs, you know, Yamahas, Rolands, like old school, you know, you can see it behind me, a bunch of old school synths, like, you know, that. Yeah, so that's what I am. Like I'm a keyboardist. I'm a modular synth guy. I can program a Moog. I build my stuff. I'm not a sample guy. Not that I you know, that's my training, right?
Sure.
I have actually tried to learn the clip-based structure because I'm kind of like a multi-track guy. Like I build songs on multi-tracks, and I just got into like an Akai Force and started working like clips. And it was a whole different experience for me because I like to actually just go and play my bass and do track 1, 2, and then go do a guitar and then go do the drums. I didn't do the clip-based kind of structure, and I was kind of like against it for a long time because like I can play, right? So why would I do that? And I found like there's a cool hybrid of taking samples and drums and clips and real stuff. You can do a lot of interesting things. So I think what you're talking about with being experimental or being different is kind of where my whole mindset has always been, to kind of more jazz fusion focused, funk focused. And so to me, it's like, where's your kind of, what are your influences in terms of the way you decide to DJ? You know, did you have a certain aesthetic that you're coming from in terms of what you pick for your the music that you pick in your decks?
So one thing I am very clear to people is I don't ever pre-build a set from start to finish for any show I do. It's always pick songs on the fly as we go. I'm too ADHD to sit down and decide ahead of time what I'm going to play. So if you are at a show that I'm doing, you are hearing me picking the songs based on your reactions as we are going. And that is just the best situation for me, because what that does is it gives me flexibility, because I usually know that there are 5 or 6 songs I'm going to play in every set regardless. You know, and it's just going to be what it is. And so, you know, I think that for me is kind of like, you know, like, for example, any gay club I walk into, I'm going to play What's Up, I'm going to play Hero, I'm going to play the, you know, the anthems at some point. When during the night you're going to hear them, I don't know, because I use them as part of crowd control. So if I feel like the crowd needs a little bit of energy, I'll drop one to try to get them, you know, geared up. If we're coming in really hot, it's a hot crowd and I know they're ready to go, I'll save them till I know they're going to sing every word of those songs along. You know, and that's just certain things based off of certain cities. Like, you know, whenever we go to New Jersey or Philadelphia, I'm going to play the 3 or 4 Bon Jovi tracks that I have. I don't know when I'm going to play them, but I'm going to play those remixes because I know the city. So for me, I take some time before every set to like look into the city we're going to figure out what they like, talk to people on the ground, get a vibe for what they really, you know, identify with, and then from there try to build out. But when we're talking about like actually the set itself, I'm consistent in looking out at the crowd and making decisions on what I'm seeing. So, you know, DJs have this thing where, you know, during the first 25-30 minutes of their set, you may hear them playing 3 or 4 different subgenres of what they're known for to see what the crowd is connecting with most before they decide where they want to go. And that's our way of testing the water to see, okay, well, Latin music isn't hitting so hard tonight, so let's try this. Okay, well, that was where they really reacted to trance, so maybe we go there. And we do that occasionally throughout the night. We'll drop a track in. But ultimately, I'll give you an example. DC is our flagship event, and it's most known for being the most circuit party of our parties. But 2 months ago, we had one where it just wasn't our usual crowd, and they were really vibing with the more international Latinx music. And so I wanted to go that route. So I pulled out all the stuff I have from Carnival stuff, and we went there, and they vibe with it. I threw in a Mortal Kombat track, they vibe with it. And, you know, I think that is one of the joys of being able to breed a crowd, is being able to see what you've got on your dance floor and make sure that every single person in that room hears at least one or two things that they can leave that club saying, man, that DJ really recognized me as a person and took the time to make sure that I felt like I wasn't an outsider.
I think that's really interesting because, like, when you play jazz and funk and fusion, we kind of read the crowds and we play based on the reactions that we get. And it's cool to hear, like, you know, musicians, I think we're all similar to what we do. We do have to read the crowd, right? And so it's cool that you just don't stay with your you know, like if we could have practiced a bunch of songs, but then we get into a crowd and if they're not feeling it, we got to switch to something else. But, you know, if you could kind of fail, if you just stay with what you practice, and the fact that you're more stream of consciousness, that you go with what you got. And I'm kind of like, I like to play with a lot of fusion guys lately, and we kind of just go off. We might have some central themes, but it will go off and then come back to it and go off and come back to it. And we don't know what we're going to do. We kind of look at each other and we do what we want to do. You know, we just feel the vibe at the moment and we play where we're going to be. You know, I don't know where I'm going to be in 10 minutes. I know where I started.
Right. I think so. I think for me, at least, when we're approaching it, right, like part of the other thing that at least I weigh as a DJ is like, you know, what's going to make us stand out from the crowd, right? Like what's going to make this different from any other party you're attending. I'm also, and I'll say this very openly because I'm not really ashamed of it, I kind of wear it as a badge of honor. There have been parties where I've played in cities and for whatever reason, my music just wasn't hitting. And I pulled myself off the card and put the next DJ on because I knew their music would hit better. And at the end of the day, that's my job as a promoter, but also as a DJ to put on the best party. And so if I'm tried 4 or 5 genres and I'm just not hitting, I'm not going to be so egotistical that I'm going to say, well, I'm here and we're doing this. I will absolutely put on someone who I think is going to put on a better show if I feel like I'm just not connecting. And I have no problem saying that because that's what I would want someone to do at a party I was attending.
Well, that's cool. You got the promoter hat on, and you're also just in connection with the crowd. You're still reading your audience. You know, and you know what that's not. If you're not going to work, then that's hard. Like if you're not in a collective, it might be hard to pull yourself off stage. But that's cool that you can do that because then you know. You kind of know you know, I think that's the core to being any kind of artist, you know?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, so especially when we go to new cities, we usually build out a bigger card, 2 or 3 DJs in the event that happens, because we don't want to put on a bad show. And so I know it may sound counterintuitive to be like, well, you were booked the headline. Yeah, but if I'm booked the headline and it's not going well, then guess what? Someone else needs to step up and make sure that this isn't a total failure, because at the end of the day, the patrons having a good time is my first and foremost goal.
Yeah, because you got a bigger picture. Because you're doing like if you're in a collective, like I've been in a lot of like electronic music collectives with a bunch of electronic synthwave bands. You know, the first synthwave band ain't kicking, and you're the first one. You don't want to lose that whole club, or they lose that whole audience. You put the next one on. It's the same thing. You know, you do that. It makes sense. I mean, it's kind of having a less selfish point of view. And a bigger world picture, you're seeing the whole picture instead of just like the one, you know, your own position in that picture.
Yeah.
So, like, what is kink to you, and what is pup play? I just wanted to jump into that.
Yeah. All right. Well, let me adjust here because that's a big one. All right. So like, I list this question mostly just because I always amuse me whether podcasters want to go there or not, and so we can go there. You know, kink to me is a representation of everything that you want it to be, right? I think some people will tell you, well, kink has to be X or kink has to be Y. And I would argue that kink is, as long as you are respecting everybody involved and respecting consent and making sure that you're communicating, kink is whatever the hell you want it to be, right? especially with pup play, right? Like I hear people, and these people are wrong, by the way, say, oh, well, you have to have gear to be a pup. You most certainly do not. That is 100% false. You can be a pup whether you have gear, no gear, whatever you want to be, as long as you are respecting the community and those around you. It's kind of whatever you want to make it. Now, that's because I fall into New Guard leather school, but also I believe that at the end of the day, the people who most identify with the kink community have always been counterculture, right? Like, your punk kids, your emo kids usually find their way to the kink space. Neurodiversity has a very large following there. And that's because it shouldn't be a judgmental zone in its perfect, I guess, world, right? But it doesn't always end up that way. But to me, at least, I think kink is a way for me to express myself, a way for me to take 2 hours and just be a dumb dog and not have a bunch of anxiety. And, also gives me a chance to remember that, like, sometimes things that I may think are super duper and serious just aren't. And it's been very helpful for me anxiety wise, very helpful for me stress wise. But yeah, I think that kink is in the eye of the beholder, as long as you are respecting everybody's rules, safe words, and so on.
Yeah, I think as an artist, I like to be free, to be able to do the kind of content I want. And in terms of, like, when I'm doing experimental music, if I want to go in a direction that's kind of, like into like, kind of counterculture, not expected stuff, like a punk aesthetic, but being really into, if you got into a kind of S&M kind of aesthetic in your music, right? Into it because you were into it, right? You're actually doing it, right? Back when Freddie Mercury was in a certain stage in Queen, he had this kind of aesthetic. They would call it like a Berlin aesthetic, and he went and he just did it. He said he was just free to do it, and he went and did it. And he would go into these phases, and because that's what he felt, and he didn't want to be restricted from being able to do it, and he was able to do it in that era. He was able to go out there and represent what he was feeling as real, is what he really felt.
And I think that's part of the allure to me, is that kink in its essence does make you vulnerable at times, and so there's a lot of trust that's supposed to be developed in kink relationships, and almost all of my friends are kinky in one way or the other. But yeah, my whole thing is literally, I think that kink belongs to everybody, and everyone should be able to do with it what they will, as long as they are respecting consent, which is a huge one, and respecting those around them.
I guess you get to points where some people are judgmental and think like somebody's trying to be a caricature or something, or they don't respect it. So what's your feeling like if you feel somebody's not being authentic?
Well, so my first response would be I think my first response to that question would be, it's not my job to decide what is and is not authentic. I am, just like anybody else in this community, not the decider of what is and is not authentic kink. I think that there are times where people will do stuff to make fun of the kink community, and that is very clear when they are doing that, and that is not what we're about, and we should be pretty easily able to point those situations out. But I think that kink is one of those things that it's so wide ranging that there is no authority on what is and is not authentic. You don't have to be flogged every day to be a submissive. You don't have to get penetrated to be a bottom. Like, there are so many other things we can talk about what is and is not authentic. But at the end of the day, it's your kink life, right? Do what you want, as long as you are being respectful to those around you, following the law, and respecting consent, because those are the three biggest ones for me. And as long as you're doing that, live your best life, and honestly, fuck anybody who tells you otherwise.
Yeah, well, I think that's the problem today. We live in a world where there's a lot of judgments coming from people who really have no place to be making judgments. And as being an artist, I've always been in a community where it's like very wide ranging. What I'd call my type of music, called expansive sound, because I didn't want to be limited to one genre, one topic. And when I first got into electronic music, people were like, "Oh, you're a DJ." It's like, well, I'm not necessarily a DJ. I'm a synthesis.
Sure.
But I can go that way. I can actually do stuff that sounds like that, but then I could do something that's fusion or new wave or dark wave or punk. I can go right and do a full out like who's to do Black Flag type of thing. And then it doesn't stop me from going Nine Inch Nails, or it doesn't stop me from going into some techno genre if I want to. I want to be able to go wherever I want to go. And then you get people who want to put you in a narrow lane. They see you in one day and they say, well, that's the way you are. But they can't deal with what you look like the next day and say, well, you're supposed to look like that every day, or you're supposed to sound like that every day.
Yeah.
So do you, because you're so kind of like you go with what you feel, do you ever get people saying, well, what's your signature sound? Would you say you have a signature sound?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that most people would tell you that I'm known as a circuit DJ, and that is what I play most of the time. But what I am very quick to remind people is that I started my career playing tech house in a bathhouse, like literally a straight up grimy as it could get bathhouse, on a wooden crate. So if you don't think that I can throw down tech house vibes or trance or any of these other things, you're wrong. But I also made a decision very early on that I was not going to be put in the box. I am a non-binary, pansexual, autistic, disabled DJ. In any other world, I am not supposed to be doing apparently what I am doing. And my response to anybody who thinks that I shouldn't be or should be doing X is, well, it's clearly working, so you're wrong. For 4.5 years now, I've had people tell me that our event wouldn't succeed and you can't make it as a DJ. And I've literally sat here and watched and proved every single one of those people wrong, and take some slight amusement in doing so, because it's just, for every one person who tells you you can't, there's another person who will tell you you can. But ultimately, if you fight and you claw and you scratch and you do what you want to do, you'll get there. It can be done. It may not be pretty, and people are certainly going to put roadblocks in your way, but you will get there. And so I think that's kind of what my signature sound, I guess, would be, is that, yeah, you're probably going to hear circuit music, but it may not be the same circuit music as the last time you heard me. Could be very Latin infused, could be very internationally infused, could be a bunch of memey SpongeBob crap. Like, you never really quite know what I'm going to pull out, because I am ADHD. I don't know what I'm going to play. I'm quite literally doing this most of the time as we go. But also am very happy to throw in tech house and other things along the way too. So I think my signature sound, if I had to describe it, would be pretty much described as eclectic, in that you just don't know what you're going to get. And I think that's part of the allure of seeing me.
Yeah, I think I am very much a big, my favorite type of musician is a musician that can evolve, or if I go see them, they don't sound the same every night. That I like going to see people who evolve, that don't stay in the same position, that even in the same tour, they're doing something different like every night. That was always what I always thought was interesting to me, and why I would follow different musicians was because of the ability to not just do the same show every night. Some bands, mention like the Eagles, they kind of find each other if they didn't play the Hotel California album note for note the same every night they did it. And I thought that's like mind numbing.
Yeah.
I'd rather see, like, the Allman Brothers would go and just reimagine their music, or Funkadelic would go and reimagine their music. You go see them and they would sound wildly different, like every night.
Yeah,
That was what I liked, the fact that they could do that.
I would say, for me, like, the person who I most identify with in terms of how to put on a performance is, ironically, this sounds bizarre given that I'm 29, is Bruce Springsteen. He is, to me, the testament of reinventing yourself many times over and still maintaining relevancy and sticking to your roots. If you listen to every one of his albums, they have evolved over time. But also, at the end of the day, he's kind of stayed true to what he has always believed in. But if you've ever seen him live, each one of his tours has been very differently constructed and put together. I just saw him up in Philadelphia a couple days ago. And, yes, this tour specifically, he's played, for the most part, the same set with a couple different songs added in here or there. But if you actually go and look at what he's played, it's very clear, and he said as much, that the purpose of this first leg of his tour is to tell a story, basically about life and touring and music and, you know, losing friends and ups and downs. And if you go back and listen to it, you know, it very much portrays that. And so for me, yes, that is very different from when I saw him for the first time when I was 16, and when my mom went and saw him for her first time when she was 16, right? All of those tours have been uniquely different, but at the same time, my man knows how to throw a show. And so, like, that's what I think I try to aim for, is that, yeah, you're going to hear the classics. You're going to hear the hits that you'd expect to hear at a gay club. You don't know when you're going to hear them. You know, I don't know which version of them you're going to hear. But in the end of the day, you're also going to hear some different things, and we're going to have a good time. You know, I come into every show knowing that I don't want to play high energy all the way through. I want to bring you on waves so I don't kill the crowd and make them all leave. The longer they're in the bar, the more they drink, the more money the bar makes. The more money the bar makes, the happier they are with me at the end of the day. So, like, you know, that all is calculated for when we are doing our sets. And so, yeah, I think that if you ever see me live, what I would tell you is to just buckle up, because, like I said, I don't know half the time when I'm going to play. Sometimes I'm walking into clubs having just gotten new music 5 minutes before we open doors, not sure what they even sound like, but it looks amusing. So, like, that's quite literally when I say I am the ADHD DJ. I kid you not. Like, it is quite literally someone. Great example. I was playing What Is the Fox Say to annoy one of my friends. They came up and said, "Why do you play this? You know I hate it. You can't make it any worse." And I said, "Oh, sure I can." And then I proceeded to loop Sandstorm underneath it in the middle of the song. And that was a completely unexpected, unplanned thing. But that's the type of stuff that just kind of happens in our event. And that's what I love.
Well, I love the kind of like stream of consciousness view, you know, idea of not doing a set, you know, practiced. Because there's a lot of people that are into like having very well rehearsed structures, and I've been in bands that are so well rehearsed they're like locked into their backing tracks and then they can't get out of it, and that to me is so mind-numbing. I just don't dig it. I hate being locked into a backing track. I don't like. I'd rather just play it like a reinterpretation of the song and then drop the backing tracks.
You're right.
And just do it off the cuff, kind of like you think about like when Kurt Cobain did Unplugged. Would you really want all those backing tracks, or you want him to just do it unplugged? You know, to me, doing live performance is like doing that unplugged. That's what I kind of prefer. That kind of off the cuff moment. You don't even know, because I saw Dylan, and Dylan was famous for reinventing his classic songs. He would do like Idiot Wind and Tangled Up in Blue, and there's different versions of those songs that have different sets of lyrics. And depending on what night you went to see him, he'd pull out a different set of lyrics that actually has a different part of the story. And if you go to see him, he'd actually have a different version of it with a totally different set. And he, you know, he has so literally, he had so many different variations that when you went to see him, he would pull those variations out. And I thought that was what was really cool about seeing him. You know, the fact that you get that different version of the song.
No, I agree. I 100% think that is something that is uniquely, I guess, special just about music, right? Is that for me, I've always believed that people can tell when something is so practiced and so rehearsed from start to finish that if it's too perfect, people will know. And you know, it's something that, like, at least as a DJ, yeah, we strive to be as perfect on our transitions as possible. But I think having sometimes that one transition that may not be crystal perfect is kind of unique, I would say. It shows that you are a person. It shows that you are not perfect, but also more importantly shows that you're still trying to do different things, right? And so yeah, I could go out and play every set the same for the next 3 years and nail every transition and every timestamp, but like, why? It's not fun for me. It should not going to be fun for the crowd. But yeah, you're absolutely right. I think that at the end of the day is exactly it.
It's like the happy accident. You know, if you go back and listen to music in the 70s, when people weren't as concerned about the BPM and the transitions and trying to be perfect, you'll hear, drumming timing errors,
Yeah.
like chord change errors, like cuts in the actual tape where they've spliced it a little off and it's a tiny bit off. But the fact is like the songs are kind of really impressive because of uh, the happy accents.
For
And so
sure.
that's where, actually playing something live and maybe not doing it exactly on right on the cue is sometimes, that one time you didn't do it on the cue can change the song and say, hey, that actually sounds better.
Yeah.
That you find things that you start to learn, like when I was with a lot of jazz bands, it's like you start to refine jazz pieces over time, get more intricate and get different sections as they grow over time. It changes and
Yeah.
it becomes like a different piece. And then a lot of jazz, like fans will go listen to certain live renditions of like Coltrane and Davis and Herbie Hancock, and they all in the Weather Report because the different live performances like evolved the song.
No, for sure. I think that's one of the cool things, just like about music, is that it's ever evolving. We have lots of creativity and things to do with it. And yeah, I think that some of the yeah, spoiler alert for those of you who haven't gone clubbing in a while. 95% of club goers are usually doing extracurriculars. So if you make a bad transition, no one's gonna ream you a new one. The three people in the room who might know will probably be other DJs who will poke fun at you. But if you own it and then turn it into something cool, then no one's gonna care.
Yeah,
Um,
it's how you respond to it. Like that's the core of being a musician, right? When you miss something, it's how you actually play off of that and do it in a kind of elegant way where no one but another musician will know you made the mistake, but they kind of react to it, and actually the whole band can kind of survive it.
yeah,
That's
for sure.
part. You can have that bad transition and actually use it and say, yeah, I wanted to do that.
Play it off, man. It's
You
literally
own it.
95%. Own it, play it off. No one will know.
Yeah, yeah. If you get all shocked and say, well, let me do that again, it's like you don't want to do that.
No.
That's like the worst days. Like don't start and stop. Like, um, so one of your questions, like, is, I mean, we probably maybe addressed about bring it up again. Is like the idea, like, being a non-binary DJ in a world of people who are not that way. How does that feel? You
I
know,
mean,
when
yeah.
you're in that environment, do you have stress about that, or you've been able to actually reconcile that and be able to feel good regardless?
I mean, that's a two-pronged question, right? Like, I'm always happy with who I am as a person, and I'm not willing to change that for anybody, full stop, for a booking. I'm not going to change who I am, what I represent, what I look like, what I wear, and what I play just to get a booking. You either get me as I am, or you just don't get me, and I'm fine either way, to be completely frank. That
Mhm.
being said, I would be very remiss if I did not acknowledge that, especially in the gay DJ world, there are a lot of cisgender, gay, white DJs who get 95% of the bookings. It just is what it is. I have a lot of women friends who are in the LGBTQ community who have to work 4 times as hard just to even get their foot in the door, and then continue to work 4 times as hard to get bookings. I have a lot
Mhm.
of non-binary friends who are non-binary friends who are white, or non-binary friends who are people of color, who also have to work 4 times as hard to get their foot in the door just to have an opportunity, because they look different. Um, so I would be remiss if I didn't sit here and at least acknowledge the elephant in the room, which is that, yeah, um, if you are not, even in the music world at all, if you are just not a white man, it is hard to get in. It just is. People will look at you as having to work twice as hard, be twice as good. Is it fair? No, it is not. And I wish I could say that isn't the truth, but it is.
Yeah.
That being said, it's getting better as the years go on. Recently, there have been more opportunities because people are creating these spaces for people to thrive who are not viewed as traditional musicians or traditional gay DJs. And so, like, to me, I think there's always going to be a part of me that continues to drive and work, because I've had so many promoters when I started telling me that they loved my music, but they didn't love the way I looked, so they weren't going to book me. And I said, well, the hell with that. I'll do my own goddamn thing.
Yeah.
And so, like, yeah.
So that's like the way collectives, like a lot of rap collectives, Like there was a point where rap artists had a hard time getting bookings because they got associated with violence. You couldn't get booked. And then they started creating collectives so they could actually get booked. And it started creating like, these a way to get past that because there's, you're going to bring violence to the city. So we can't book you and all kinds of like idiotic things back then. And now it's like less so because hip hop is rule of the world. But like at the beginning of hip hop, it was very difficult to get into a club because it's like, oh, what are you guys doing?
No, for sure. I mean, that's it, right? So like, yeah, I think that's really the way it's been for music for everyone is that if you don't look the right way, talk the right way, act the right way, you got to work twice as hard. And I'm not about that.
Yeah, well, I love to see that people are building up their own communities and their own events. And you've got your own promotional structure. I think a lot of that's the future, like of kind of doing it yourself. That's the nature of the industry now, because the industry used to have lots of gatekeepers, and you couldn't get past the gatekeepers unless you looked a certain way and did a certain thing and worked with certain people. And now you have a lot more of people who can come from different places that maybe people never saw before. And I think that's it always helps music when people aren't just doing the cookie cutter. I've always been I've been doing this podcast for many years since 2016. And my whole goal was to bring emerging and independent artists that don't get paid attention to, give them attention. That's the whole point of my show. That's what I've been doing the whole time. And we've branched out into other things, but the core goal has been to shed light on people I think that people need to pay attention to. And it's not always whoever's in the top 10 or top 100 or whatever. It's whoever I think is very interesting and needs to be shown.
I appreciate the opportunity, truly.
So you have a big effort going on for the next couple of months. That's like you mentioned at the beginning, that your LOBO initiative, that what you're doing right now is going to last until like the end of summer.
Yeah, so the LOBO initiative, our 501c3 nonprofit, is going to be going year round. So we're happy to get that off the ground. But yeah, basically our biggest shows are obviously during Pride Month, and our biggest shows for LOBO, so usually start around March, April, May, June, Slow Down Forbidden, and come back towards the end of the year as well. So we are excited about that, but all that info can be found on our website. And as we reach the end here, I'll also just point out our last major pillar, which is that we've always believed that we are a community event first. So we have a policy where if someone's going through tough times and can't afford the ticket, they just have to message us and we give them a free one to come to the event, no questions asked. Because we're not going to be the people who price out people who need to come and be around friends. We've never believed in that. And in our opinion, the loss of $15 is not worth the loss of someone's life.
Wow, that's really cool. Because, given what the big ticket people are doing today to fans of music, that's pretty awesome.
That has always been our policy since day one in every city. It will remain a policy forever. That our most expensive ticket ever has only ever been $20. And even then, if someone can't afford to go, they just message us. We don't ask questions and we send them a ticket. It's really that simple.
Well, people should go out to jakemaxwellproductions.com and check that out. I'm glad that you came on the show tonight. It's really cool to see someone who's actually living what they believe. That's always cool to see that. And I've always wanted on the show to shed light on individuals who are doing, I think, their best effort to have connections to the community. And that's really cool what you're doing. I really think that people should check out your website, go to one of your shows, and have fun, because I think that's what it's about.
That's what it's always been about.
But thank you. Thank you very much. So thank you again for being on tonight. Again, this will be published all over the podcast universe. Almost every platform will have it by tomorrow, and we'll send that information to you and your fans. And thank you for being with the Phantom Electric Ghost show tonight. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.